My best friend had a crush on my brother, while I secretly liked her brother. When our eyes met, her suggestion was clear: how about we spice things up? And so, we lied about switching souls and moved into each other's homes. Her brother, Ethan, was always reserved and distant, the epitome of self-control. But at home, he casually walked around showing off his abs. I stared for 2.5 seconds, before gritting my teeth and pretending not to care. What I didn't expect was for him to hook the back of my nightgown collar, lean in, and laugh softly. "Roundy, stop pretending. I've known it was you all along." 01 The summer after my sophomore year of college, I didn't go back to my own home. At a crossroads in our small town, on the left stood the ever-after wedding planning shop, run by my parents. Inside, my best friend Faye was already waiting, grinning at me through the window, and even winking mischievously. I turned my head, trying to act unbothered, and followed her brother Ethan to the right, into his family's funeral home, Serenity Rest. 02 Faye and I had been friends for over a decade. Despite growing up as next-door neighbors, our parents were never on good terms. After all, my family dealt with weddings, while hers specialized in funerals, two businesses destined to clash, especially when they were located across the street from each other. Faye, Ethan, my brother Ryan, and I had been involuntary participants in our parents' rivalry since childhood. My dad would boast to her dad, "Our Roundy just got first place in school again." "How about your Fifi? How did she do?" Her father, with a forced smile, would reply, "Oh, Fifi's doing all right. She won first place too, but, just in a little state-level competition. Nothing major." Once the kids were compared, the moms would take over. My mom would pull Ryan over with a beaming smile. "Flame, sing that original song of yours for your aunt. The one everyone's trying to buy the rights for?" Faye's mom, unwilling to be outdone, would immediately call, Ethan, come out here and take a stroll." "Yes, just walk around." And that's how our parents had been at each other's throats for over a decade. But Faye and I somehow became inseparable over the years, and to make things even more complicated, I developed a crush on her brother while she fell for my rebellious younger brother. When I found out she liked Ryan, I couldn't help but shout in disbelief. "You like Ryan? The same Ryan who used to pull your pigtails when we were kids?" Faye shouted back, equally exasperated, "I'm an M, is that a problem?" I paused. "Fine. You win." She clicked her tongue and turned the tables on me. "And you're no better. My brother's like a walking iceberg, completely uninterested in people, but you've liked him for years. You're an M too, and a hopeless one at that." Her words left me stunned. My pupils practically trembled. Clutching my chest, I muttered, "Damn it, she's right." The air became still. On the restaurant TV, there was a Korean drama playing something about two people switching souls. Inspiration struck as I turned to Faye, catching her equally mischievous gaze. After a decade of friendship, I knew exactly what she was thinking. "How about we make things interesting? We had nothing better to do that summer, after all." She nodded without hesitation, her grin even more wicked than mine. "I'm in." 03 Summer vacation was a busy time for both the wedding and funeral industries. Our parents were traveling constantly, leaving no time to stay at home. Faye and I came up with a ridiculous plan. We swapped phone cases and bags, then boldly claimed to have switched souls before moving into each other's homes. Once everything was set, a rare moment of clarity hit me. "Faye, don't you think we're being completely insane? I mean, soul swapping is beyond absurd. If our parents aren't home, why not just openly approach them instead?" Faye wagged her finger smugly. "You don't get it. People only show their true selves in front of family. This is like a hands-on experiment. If the person we like has any awful habits, we can back out before it's too late with no emotional investment. Her logic left me dumbfounded. She squinted at me mischievously, raising an eyebrow. Think about it. What if my brother turns out to be a total creep? My curiosity flared. Then I have to see just how creepy he is. 04 Even Faye, his own sister, couldn't fully describe what kind of person Ethan was. He was 2 years older than us, and always carried an air of detachment. Faye once told me, there was a time when he stood in for my dad as a funeral director. I went along to watch, and one of the grieving family members started crying so hard they blew a snot bubble. I almost lost it and laughed. But when I looked at Ethan, his expression was as calm as ever. That's when I knew this family business was meant for him. Despite that, Ethan didn't choose a funeral-related major in college. Instead, he studied law. I worried aloud. What if he figures out we're lying? Faye, now accessorizing me with her jangly jewelry, dismissed my concerns. Please. He's studying law, not mind reading. He can't see through people. But despite her reassurances, I still felt nervous when I was alone with Ethan. Closing the shop, heading home, locking the door, it was just the two of us. Ethan stood by the entryway, unmoving, his gaze fixed on me. It felt like he was suspicious of something. I swallowed hard, trying to stay composed as I walked over to the couch and sat down. I turned on the TV, putting on the show Faye had been following. For a while, I could feel the tension in my back as his gaze lingered on me. Finally, he looked away. A moment later, he grabbed 2 cans of cold soda and sat down next to me. So close. Close enough for me to catch the faint, clean scent on him. My breath hitched. Suddenly, he called out, seemingly casually, Faye. Yeah? I responded. You're wearing the wrong slippers, he said. Impossible. I instinctively looked down at my feet, at the pink Hello Kitty slippers I was wearing. Faye had specifically told me these were the right pair. No mistake. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Ethan was testing me. Of course, soul swapping isn't exactly the most believable thing. But I'm not most people. I forced myself to keep playing along, mimicking Faye's tone as I called him, Bro, I'm not wearing the wrong slippers. You must have made too many paper dolls earlier and got yourself all woozy. Ethan glanced at me silently, his expression unreadable. I clenched my fists, barely managing to hold it together. But then, in the next second, he responded nonchalantly, guess I remembered wrong. Under the soft, ambient lighting, it seemed like the corners of his lips curved into a fleeting smile. Or maybe it was just my imagination. Either way, I couldn't sit still anymore. Abruptly, I got up and dashed into the bathroom. Closing the door, locking it, I pressed my back against the cool surface and tried to steady the wild thudding of my heart. When I looked up at the mirror, the person staring back at me had ears flushed bright red. At dinner, Ethan had planned to cook. You should go take a shower, he said, stepping into the kitchen. He tied an apron around his waist with deliberate ease, his long lashes casting faint shadows as he looked down. The cool, composed demeanor, paired with that alluring little tear mole at the corner of his eye, was almost too much to handle. I nearly swooned on the spot. Sweet rice dumplings, he said, glancing sideways at me as I clutched my clothes. Want some? Yes, I'll eat whatever you cook, I nodded fervently. This time, I saw it for real. He smiled. Softly, he added, such a good girl. Heat rushed to my face, and I bolted into the bathroom. I realized I might have slipped out of Faye's usual bratty persona for a second there, but Ethan didn't seem to mind. Standing under the shower head, the warm water cascading down, only one thought occupied my muddled brain: damn, Ethan's surprisingly easy to fool. Just as I finished my shower and turned off the water, my phone buzzed from where I'd placed it on my clothes. It was a message from Faye, sharing the same sentiment. Your brother's way too easy to fool. He's so well behaved at home. Whatever I ask him to do, he does it without question. Wait. Ryan's not usually this obedient, is he? Drying my hair, I texted her back, what exactly have you been making him do? Faye replied, oh, just giving me shoulder massages, back rubs. Oh, and now he's doing my laundry. My brain short-circuited for a moment. And? Let me guess, he made you pay him in gold coins, right? Faye, I gave them willingly. You wouldn't believe how cute he was when he said, thank you, sis, with that sweet smile. Ugh. Hopeless. Absolutely hopeless romantic. I typed back, you idiot. Calm down. I'd barely hit send when I pushed the bathroom door open and immediately lost all sense of calm. Ethan had changed into a fresh set of clothes and was sitting in the living room with a book resting on his lap. But his eyes weren't on the pages. He was staring at me. I felt like I was about to explode into a firework. His gaze stayed locked on me, unwavering. Water dripped from my hair, tracing a path down my shoulder and disappearing beneath the neckline of my shirt. That's when it hit me, and I stammered, bro? What's up? Why are you staring at me? He lowered his gaze, crossing one leg over the other, his voice calm but slightly hoarse. Nothing. Just, not used to how you look now. I let out a sigh of relief. Yeah, same here. Faye's nightgown had a wide neckline, but since I was much bigger than her, it fit a little too snugly. A little too revealingly. And then, as I reached for the hairdryer, I realized something horrifying: I'd forgotten to put on a bra. It was painfully obvious. My brain short-circuited again, and I scrambled into Faye's bedroom, trying on everything I could find. Too small. Too small. Too small. In the end, I had to make do with some pasties and an oversized t-shirt under the nightgown to cover up the curves. No wonder Ethan had looked like he wanted to say something earlier. So awkward. I wanted to dig a hole and disappear. As I blow-dried my hair, silently chanting mantras to calm my embarrassment, I heard Ethan's voice from the living room. He was on a video call. Ethan, why are you still at home? I messaged you 30 minutes ago. We're waiting for you. It was a girl, her voice sweet and bubbly. She must have seen my silhouette in the background because her tone sharpened. Who's that? A guy laughed in the background. Chill, he said he's bringing his sister. His real sister? The girl asked skeptically. I heard Ethan's calm reply. Yeah. My real sister. His tone was steady, but the slight drawl at the end made it oddly intriguing. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't even noticed when he'd walked up behind me. The hairdryer slipped from my hand, but before I could react, he caught it. His fingers gently threaded through my damp hair, blow-drying it with a light touch. He didn't say a word. Brothers helping sisters dry their hair, it's perfectly normal, right? I stayed perfectly still, head lowered, quietly overthinking everything. Being Ethan's sister is such a blessing. Faye, on the other hand, doesn't know how good she has it. She used to complain that her brother didn't know how to take care of people. I couldn't help but smile, my lips curling upward. Look at him now, he's doing pretty well, isn't he? Guess we won't be getting those mochi balls, he said after drying my hair. A friend of mine is leaving the country. There's a farewell party, and you can tag along to grab a bite. Oh, a dinner party. Sure, why not? But what I didn't expect was to end up at a luxurious villa, complete with a pool party and a crowd teeming with scantily clad models. I stood there, wide-eyed, utterly stunned. Just then, a red-haired guy wearing a jade Buddha necklace walked toward us. He glanced at me, paused for a moment, then raised an eyebrow at Ethan. Wait, you have another sister? Ethan remained calm. She's Faye. He draped an arm casually over my shoulder. It felt natural, unforced. The redhead burst out laughing. Why don't you just say she's the reincarnation of Caesar Augustus? I might actually believe that I wanted to dig my toes into the ground from embarrassment. But then Ethan smiled faintly. Soul swapping pretty common, no? What an absurd thing to say. Yet, somehow, coming from Ethan, it sounded oddly convincing. After all, he grew up watching his parents work in life and death situations. He's probably seen more corpses than I've completed practice exam booklets. Could there really be such supernatural phenomena? Even I started to doubt myself. While the redhead looked skeptical, I studied his face again and then the eye-catching jade Buddha dangling on his chest. Suddenly, it clicked. I remembered who he was. In high school, he often ate lunch with Ethan in the cafeteria. Faye once mentioned a wealthy family friend who frequently visited their home, nicknamed Bro Gold. I blinked at him. The redhead sucked in a sharp breath. After muttering a stunned, "What the hell," he completely bought it. He leaned in, peering at me curiously, but Ethan swatted him away. She's here to eat. Now, where's the food? Scanning the area, Ethan noticed male models showing off their abs nearby. Without missing a beat, he shifted to block my view and said coolly, "This party is way too adult. We'll sit at the kids' table." Bro Gold wasn't having it. He pointed to the terrace on the second floor where several people stood, teasing, "All your classmates are up there. Look, the girls from our class have been staring at you for ages. TSK, TSK, tisk." Ethan was just as popular as ever. I remembered how, back in our first year of high school, word about the stunningly handsome senior spread like wildfire in less than 3 days. Years later, while other college guys either ruined their looks with bad perms or developed pale, unhealthy complexions from poor habits, Ethan only grew sharper and more striking. He was the epitome of youthful perfection. No one could resist. I, however, chose to sit alone in a corner on the first floor, absent-mindedly stuffing mini cakes into my mouth. Ethan had invited me upstairs, but I declined. For one thing, I didn't know anyone up there, and I was still pretending to be Faye. For another, I didn't want to see Ethan laughing and chatting with other girls. After all, Faye once told me that despite being perpetually single, her brother had liked someone before. He'd even confessed. And been rejected. I couldn't imagine what kind of dazzling girl could turn Ethan down. I stuffed another overly sweet piece of cake into my mouth, silently warning myself to stop eating. The sugary overload was starting to make my stomach churn, and that bitterness in my chest only intensified. I hated bitterness. So, I lifted my eyes and began zoning out, staring at the male and female models by the pool. You know what? It worked like a charm. I grabbed my phone and snapped a few shots of particularly well-built models, sending them to Faye to enjoy. True best friends share everything, right? She immediately replied with shocked emojis. What the hell? Did my brother take you to Oglemen? Damn it, why didn't I stick around for a few more days before pulling my stunt? Ugh, you little brat, You better cop a feel for me. As if on cue, I looked up and locked eyes with one of the male models, a guy wearing a mask. His almond-shaped eyes brimmed with charm. His white t-shirt, soaked through, clung transparently to his sharply defined abs. I stared at him, dumbfounded, for what felt like an eternity. Then, to my utter shock, he started walking toward me. Oh my God. Despite all the banter I'd shared with Faye, I was actually a total coward. Online, I'd talk big, but in real life, I'd never even held a guy's hand. And now, here he was, standing right in front of me. I quickly averted my gaze, forcing a nervous smile. Hi, can I help you? Roundy. I froze when I heard him call me by my nickname. My eyes widened in disbelief. He reached up, removed his mask, and revealed a familiar face. My jaw dropped as I blurted, Chase? It was my high school desk mate. He'd gone into modeling? He smiled awkwardly, lowering his head a little. Long time no see. In my memory, Chase was just like me, a straight-laced, well-behaved student. He was diligent and had gotten into a good university. I never imagined this. The shy boy who once blushed under the locust tree while confessing to me was now the captivating male model who had just commanded the stage. A whirlwind of emotion swept through me. Ethan simply repeated, "Long time no see." Chase seemed like he wanted to say more but was interrupted by someone calling out to him from the side, "Hey, number one, come over here and show us that bottle opening trick with your abs." He gave me an embarrassed smile. Work calls. Later, can we chat for a bit? I nodded. I then watched as Chase was surrounded by a group of people who tried to make him drink, yet he kept smiling through it all. When our eyes met briefly, his smile faltered for just a moment, revealing something uncomfortable. I couldn't help but think back to high school, when the principal read out the list of students receiving financial aid. Chase's name was called, and his reaction had been the same, slightly dodging my gaze. I stood up and walked over to him. Bro Gold's friend saw me approaching and started teasing, "Hey, sweetheart, wanna join us?" I smiled sweetly and said, "I just want to go over there and take a few videos of him, would that be okay?" They waved me off. "Sure, do whatever you want then." Laughing, one of them shouted toward the second-floor terrace, "Bro Gold, bring on some younger guys next time." Their laughter echoed across the room, but all of a sudden, I felt a piercing gaze land on me. I froze. Slowly, my eyes drifted upward. Ethan was watching me from above, his expression unreadable. By the time we were leaving, Ethan was so drunk he could barely stand, leaning on me for support. He insisted I be the one to help him, and I had no choice but to let him put his full weight on me. Struggling under the pressure, I finally managed to get him to the rideshare car. Chase caught up to us just then. I panicked, worried he might call me by my old nickname, Roundy, and quickly shoved Ethan into the car, slamming the door shut behind him. Turning to Chase, I whispered, "It's complicated, and I don't have time to explain. Just, don't call me by my name, okay?" Chase looked baffled, but nodded anyway. Lowering his voice to match mine, he cautiously asked, "Are you and Ethan together?" I let out a deep sigh. How could we be? He only sees me as a sister. I knew it was true. Ethan would never like someone as timid and insecure as me. Chase opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, the car window rolled down. Ethan's low, drunken voice cut through the night as he called out, slowly and deliberately, "Time to go home, little sis." I flinched, quickly waving goodbye to Chase, before climbing into the car. Chase hesitated for a moment, then waved back. "Stay in touch," he called after me. In the car, Ethan was quiet, resting his head on my shoulder with his eyes closed. I didn't dare move, feeling the warmth of his breath against my neck, soft and steady. It seemed like he had fallen asleep. Outside the window, street lights flickered by, their glow dancing across his face. I couldn't help myself. I raised a hand, gently touching the small tear-shaped mole under his eye. It reminded me of a long-ago afternoon, one so quiet and fleeting it felt like a dream. Back then, he had napped beside me, and I'd wanted to count his eyelashes. But in the end, I got too nervous and ran away instead. "Ethan," I whispered his name. He didn't respond. I glanced at the rearview mirror and caught sight of my own reflection. I was smiling, silly and soft. In this stolen moment of time, I secretly, selfishly, reveled in the quiet joy of being near him. Suddenly, the car hit a bump. Ethan's body swayed slightly, his eyelids fluttering open, just a sliver. Still leaning against my shoulder, he met my gaze through the rearview mirror, his eyes heavy with drowsiness. For a moment, I felt as though he could see right through me, uncovering every unspoken secret, my feelings, my lies. I held my breath, quickly lowering my gaze. My heart raced as I heard Ethan's raspy voice break the silence. "Do you like him?" "What?" "That male model." Ethan closed his eyes again. He must have been worried that his little sister was being charmed by some bad boy from the nightlife scene. Well, Faye did seem to have a thing for those edgy, rebellious types, like my younger brother, for instance. I kept my face neutral, answering carefully, "No. I just thought his physique was impressive." Ethan let out a soft chuckle, though it was hard to tell what he meant by it. Then he fell silent once more. When it was time to help him out of the car, he leaned on me even more heavily than before, his hand pressing down harder on my shoulder. When we got back, Ethan seemed a bit more sober and went straight to the bathroom to shower. But he didn't come out for a long time. Worried, I knocked on the door. "Hey, are you okay in there?" Through the frosted glass, I could see the faint outline of his shadow, swaying slightly. For a long moment, there was no response. I grew anxious and knocked again. "Ethan?" Just as I was contemplating how to break the door down and rescue him, his voice finally came through. "Yeah, I'm here." His tone was languid, almost teasing, the tail end of his words drawing out lazily. My face flushed despite myself. "Don't stay in there too long, it's not safe." He murmured, his voice hoarse. "Almost done." Feeling slightly relieved, I went to the kitchen to pour him a glass of grape juice, to help with the hangover. When I returned, the bathroom was empty, the mirror fogged up with steam. From the adjacent laundry room, I heard the faint beeping of a washing machine starting up. Ethan was doing laundry. Wait, what? A strange sensation crept over me, like I was forgetting something important. My thoughts spun in circles, tangled and chaotic, as the sound of the washer churned on. Then, suddenly, it hit me like a freight train. I glanced again at the laundry basket in the bathroom. It had been emptied out. But the delicate clothing I wore this afternoon, which I hadn't had a chance to wash yet, was supposed to still be in there. I had rushed out earlier for dinner. Lace. Bunny ears. Ribbons. The fog on the mirror had dissipated slightly, faintly reflecting my burning red face. That night, I couldn't get a wink of sleep. I lay wide-eyed, tossing and turning like a pancake on Faye's bed. The rain fell steadily that night, thick and persistent in the summer monsoon season. The sound of raindrops pattered on until dawn. When the rain finally stopped, I leapt out of bed. Grabbing my phone, I saw it was already 5 a.m. For some reason, I decided to text Faye. "Let's switch back." What a coward I was. I had confidently declared that I wanted to see for myself just how much of a repressed oddball Ethan was. But now, I realized I'd essentially become a squatter, a voyeur peeking into someone else's life. Better to retreat before things got even more awkward. What I didn't expect was that Faye was also awake. Maybe she hadn't slept all night either. But to my surprise, she refused. Faye, let's wait a bit longer. Me? Faye, you won't believe this, but your brother is lying in bed with me right now. I jumped out of bed again. Faye sent a thinking cat meme, complete with a bow tie. He said it was raining, and he's scared of thunderstorms. He didn't dare sleep alone. He also said you used to comfort him to sleep when he was little. What the heck? Was this some kind of bizarre soap opera? Ryan? Afraid of thunderstorms? When he was younger, he used to brag about yanking storm clouds out of the sky to play soccer with them. Me, I'm starting to think the person in your bed isn't my brother. Faye, huh? I face-bombed. When he wakes up, take him to a church or something. If the pastor doesn't see anything off, send him to the psych ward on Oakwater Road. Faye. Okay. By the way, why are you so eager to switch back? Did you find out a secret about my brother? Your brother is squeaky clean. I lowered my eyes and typed, I feel guilty for deceiving him. Faye seemed a bit reluctant. After a while, she replied with a hint of regret, all right then. We agreed on a final deadline and planned to return to our own lives tonight. I closed my eyes, but still couldn't sleep. Giving up, I got up to wash up and decided to make some breakfast. But when I looked up, I saw a few pieces of clothing hanging on the balcony. The soft pink fabric stood out starkly amid the surrounding blacks, whites, and grays. My hand trembled as I carefully took it down. It still felt slightly damp to the touch. But I couldn't bear to leave it hanging there so boldly. I took it, placing it on the windowsill in Faye's room, to finish drying. It seemed to carry the same scent as Ethan. That faint, clean fragrance of laundry detergent. It always reminded me of Ethan during our school days. As a freshman and a senior, our paths rarely crossed except during the Tuesday afternoon gym class. I would usually rush up the stairs. He, on the other hand, would stroll leisurely down. Voices buzzed all around us, but we stayed silent. Passing by each other. Only the faint scent of the breeze lingered. Having a secret crush makes you self-conscious. I could never stand tall and confident in front of Ethan. Because when my first feelings of love blossomed, my awkward teenage years had just begun as well. First came puberty, then came the weight gain. At 5 feet 3 inches and 180 pounds in middle school, my parents said I was perfectly fine. Roundy, round and cute, they'd tease. Until freshman year during military training, when the drill instructor gave me a disdainful glance as I struggled to keep up with the group and gasped for air. Fat piglet, he muttered. Eating so much and still so weak, huh? My classmates snickered along. For some reason, under the blazing summer sun, I forced a smile. Ignoring the tiny sprout of resentment growing inside me. I tried to act like I didn't care about the mocking laughter. But the more I tried, the more I cared. Standing at the back of the line, biting my lip, I couldn't stop the tears from falling. I didn't know why I suddenly broke down. Maybe it was because Ethan happened to walk across the field at that moment. He stopped. Silently staring at my trembling, ugly shell. My clenched fists. My awkward smile. I lowered my head, avoiding him. I didn't want him to see me like that. But the tears and the awkward, overweight body couldn't be hidden. The inevitable growing pains. Later, The drill instructor for our class was suddenly replaced by someone much kinder and more respectful. Faye secretly told me my brother went to complain to the school principal. The drill instructors aren't allowed to insult, mock, or physically punish new students. Yours broke all the rules. But apparently, the standards for these things are really vague. The instructor told the principal he was just joking around and didn't punish anyone excessively. He also said no one had ever complained before and accused my brother of being too sensitive. He didn't expect my brother to be such a tough cookie, and the principal actually backed him up without hesitation and fired the instructor. Guess why? With teary eyes, I asked, why? Faye smiled mischievously, holding up a finger. I followed the direction of her pointed finger, looking toward the far end of the cafeteria. Through the crowd, the first thing I saw was Ethan, unhurriedly putting away his tray. Next to him was another guy, still wolfing down his food. He had a buzz cut and wore a jade Buddha pendant. That's Golden Nugget, the principal's son and my brother's best buddy. My brother dragged him there with him. I remember it vividly. From that day on, I became painfully aware of one thing. I was doomed. I might just end up liking Ethan for the rest of my life. I thought losing weight would make me stop feeling insecure. But I was wrong. The year Ethan graduated from high school, I mustered the courage to write him a love letter. I tucked it into my bag and knocked on his door. It was midsummer again, but this time I wasn't hiding in oversized t-shirts and baggy shorts. As I waited, I nervously adjusted the hem of my white sundress. The door opened. It was Faye, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "What's going on?" she asked groggily. With the letter hidden behind my back, I asked, "Is your brother home?" "Nope, he's at his graduation party," she replied. "Oh," I muttered, staring down. "All right then." Faye yawned again. "You're here to see him, aren't you?" I kicked at a pebble by my feet and said quietly, "I just wanted to borrow his study notes." Faye smirked at me. "Come on, Roundy, who are you kidding? That tiny waist of yours can't even hide the pink letter behind your back. It's a love letter, isn't it?" Turns out, I hadn't hidden a thing. What I thought was a secret crush was, in fact, an open secret. Everyone seemed to know. And Ethan? Did he know? Was he oblivious, or just pretending not to notice? Faye grabbed her phone and sent me a location via text. "Go on, go. Maybe you'll even get a free meal out of it." I smiled faintly but said, "Forget it." The courage I had summoned quietly slipped away. "You can't just give up." Faye suddenly shook my shoulders, exasperated. "Roundy, summer doesn't last forever. You can't keep hiding in your shell, just watching other butterflies snatch away the flower you love." I stared at her anxious expression, dumbfounded. That day, Faye's words gave me the push I needed. Without hesitation, I ran toward Ethan. I almost broke out of my cocoon. Almost. But I didn't. By evening, I was walking home alone under a setting sun, utterly dejected. I was still clutching a love letter in my hand. But it wasn't the one I had written for Ethan. At the party, I met a girl blushing, but radiant and stunning in a way that drew everyone's attention. She handed me her love letter. "You're Ethan's sister, right? Could you please give this to him?" Then she ran off, disappearing in an instant. Ethan was actually in one of the rooms around the corner at the time. He wasn't a heavy drinker, and even a little alcohol would tint his fair, handsome face with a soft red. While his classmates were laughing and crying in the next room, he had fallen quietly asleep in his own. The hallway was empty and silent as I stepped inside. The afternoon was peaceful. I stared at him for a long time. Then, softly, I called out, "Ethan." Ethan, he didn't wake. I placed the girl's love letter on the bedside table next to him. Then I walked out. Calmly, I tossed my own letter into the trash. The blazing sun burned my heart. I suddenly realized that the dark, jealous thoughts growing inside me hadn't gone away after all. And so, I did something foolish. I went back to Ethan's room, snatched the girl's letter, and clenched it tightly in my hand. Like a pathetic thief, I looked around in panic and fled in embarrassment. That letter was locked away in my drawer. Late at night, it would taunt me with its piercing laughter. Ethan would never like me. I knew that. Later, when Ethan was preparing for college applications, I couldn't bear the torment of my guilt any longer. I finally gave him the long overdue letter, the one that wasn't mine. I'm just a complete coward. But 2 years later, after Faye and I had both graduated, Ethan still wasn't dating anyone. Faye said he'd been rejected by someone, and he seemed heartbroken. He spent his days volunteering at a funeral home, helping to restore the bodies of the deceased. He said working on them brought him a strange sense of calm. One day, he asked me where I planned to go for college. I looked at the admission scores for the university he was attending, New Haven University. I was 2 points short. So I answered, probably staying local, at Linville College. It was such a failed crush. I still hung my head low. But deep down, I felt a quiet sense of relief. Let's just end it here, I thought. Ethan woke up. I heard the door to his bedroom open. I opened my own door, intending to tell him, I made some oatmeal, and it's still, but the last 2 words didn't come out. My voice abruptly stopped. A rush of heat surged to my face. Ethan wasn't wearing a shirt, just a pair of gray lounge pants. His broad shoulders and defined muscles were on full display, his toned frame effortlessly commanding attention. Leaning against the wall, his eyes were closed, and he lazily massaged his temples, clearly hungover. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't tear my gaze away from the alluring curve of his back and the dimples of his lower waist. My breaths grew shallow as the faint outline of his sculpted shark fin muscles teased my vision. My eyes drifted downward, tracing the contours of his firm waist and abdomen until enjoying the view. His voice, husky and languid, startled me. I looked up to find Ethan gazing at me with a lazy smile as he sauntered closer. Do you want to see how it feels? My brain short-circuited, a chaotic explosion of thoughts firing off in all directions. Surely, he was still drunk, right? My face burned as I spun around, stammering, I'll go get you some porridge. I had barely taken a step when I felt him gently hook a finger around the strap of my nightgown. My knees went weak, and I nearly stumbled into the corner of the sofa, but he caught me, his hand steadying me at the waist. The sensation of his fingertips brushing against my skin sent an electric jolt through me, and I trembled slightly. Instinctively, my hands pressed against his bare chest to push him away. Beneath my palms, his heartbeat powerfully thump resonating against my touch. At the same time, the thin silk of my nightgown allowed my soft form to graze against his warm skin. I tried to retreat, but his firm hand on my waist kept me rooted in place. He lowered his head, his gaze locked onto mine, unblinking. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he swallowed. I felt faint, my head spinning, as something hot and firm pressed against my lower abdomen. But then, in the next moment, Ethan released me and strode back into the bathroom without a word. I collapsed onto the sofa, clutching my chest as my rapid heartbeat echoed in my ears for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't until the morning light streamed in through the windows that I managed to piece together my chaotic thoughts. And in that moment, I recalled what he had whispered in my ear, before pulling away. "Roundy," he rasped, his voice low and rough. "Stop pretending. I've known it was you all along." I fled. Again. When I returned home, I was greeted by the sight of my younger brother pinning Faye against the wall in a passionate kiss. Quietly, I closed the door and turned to leave. Great. I got the message loud and clear, there was no place for me in this world anymore. I ended up at a cafe by the roadside, staring blankly at my surroundings. Everything felt surreal and absurd. So Ethan had seen through the lies Faye and I had concocted from the very beginning. But why hadn't he exposed us? Was it because he didn't care and simply indulged in our childish games? Or was it for some other reason? My thoughts spiraled as I stared at my phone. Ethan had sent me a single text. That's right, just 6 dots. Nothing more, nothing less. I didn't know how to respond, so I sent back, "Ethan, I'm sorry." The typing indicator appeared and lingered for a long time, before another message finally came through. "Ethan, Roundy, are you going to reject me again?" Again? I was hit by a wave of confusion, unable to make sense of his words. Just then, another message popped up. It was from Chase. He wanted to talk. The cafe was quiet. Chase was dressed simply, wearing black-rimmed glasses that gave him the same shy and boyish look he had back in high school. "Sorry," he said softly. His first words to me mirrored my own apologies to Ethan. Chase kept his eyes lowered, much like how I avoided Ethan's gaze. "Roundy," he said hesitantly, his voice low, "you like Ethan, don't you?" I froze, stunned that even he could see through me. Apparently, I wasn't as good at hiding my feelings as I thought. Chase gave a small, bittersweet smile, tinged with guilt and unease. Then, slowly, he began to tell me about something he'd kept buried deep in his heart. It was the summer after our final exams, the day he had planned to confess his feelings to me. But before he could, he had seen Ethan standing beneath a blooming tree, holding a bunny-shaped cake. "I knew right away he was waiting for you." I don't know what came over me, but I walked up to him and made small talk. Then he got a phone call and left in a hurry. I remembered now. The bunny cake Ethan had given me that day had been handed to me by Chase. That had also been the day Ethan's great-grandfather passed away. Chase looked up at me, his voice trembling slightly as he continued. "It wasn't just the cake. There was a letter in the gift box, a love letter that I tore up." His words struck me like thunderclaps, each one reverberating in my mind. "I was jealous of him," Chase admitted. "Ethan was better than me at everything: grades, looks, his family background, and the bond he shared with you since childhood. I knew I couldn't compete with him, so I tore up his letter. Only then did I have the courage to confess to you. But you still turned me down. It's taken me years to work up the courage to tell you this now. Roundy, I'm sorry." I went home. To Ethan's home. The curtains in his room were drawn tightly shut, blocking out all light. He sat in the dim bedroom, his phone discarded to the side, the screen still open to our chat. One hand covered his eyes. He hadn't seen my latest message. I felt like I had traveled back in time, to the summer of our first year of high school. Quietly, softly, I called out to him. "Ethan." He didn't respond, his hand still shielding his face. But I noticed the faint tremor in his fingertips. I reached out and took his hand in mine. Leaning in close, I looked into his tear-streaked eyes and smiled sweetly at him. My own eyes were red-rimmed, glistening with unshed tears. "Ethan," I said gently, "I lost a love letter. Do you think it's too late to try and find it now?" He tightened his grip on my hand, interlocking our fingers. Then he pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly. "I'll read it to you," he whispered. Word by word. Ethan, epilogue. I've always been a boring person. The older generation praises me for being mature, while my peers describe me as aloof. I can't bring myself to share my inner thoughts with anyone, neither family nor friends, not even classmates. It's truly an awful personality trait, like a snow-capped mountain. From afar, it might appear beautiful, but up close, its barrenness and coldness are enough to drive anyone away. So, I've come to believe I'll never get married because no one could possibly love me for a lifetime. That summer after our college entrance exams, during a class reunion, I pretended to be drunk and slipped into a neighboring room for some peace and quiet. When Roundy walked in, I was feigning sleep. I thought I'd tease her a little. She must have been looking at me for a long, long time. Until finally, the little teardrop-shaped mole under my eye was gently touched. Roundy had always been fascinated by that mole, I knew it. That's why I often lowered my eyelashes, so her attention would always be on me. I loved the feeling of being looked at by her. It was exhilarating. After a long silence, I heard her softly call my name, Ethan. Why didn't she call me brother, like she always did? She leaned in closer, carrying a faint, delicate fragrance. Her hair brushed against the side of my face, and suddenly, I felt nervous. But none of the chaotic fantasies in my mind came true. She simply placed a letter beside me. I waited patiently for her to leave. The moment the door clicked shut, I opened my eyes and unfolded the letter. And then, the rare flicker of hope that had ignited in me was extinguished by a wave of crushing disappointment. This wasn't a love letter from Roundy. It wasn't even a love letter at all. It was just a silly, boring dare from some game. The paper had a big, goofy ghost face drawn on it, signed by the class rep. Everyone knew the class rep was into girls. She was dating the class president. I listlessly folded the letter back up, lay down again, and bored myself with the thought, why didn't Roundy write me a love letter? Roundy, Roundy. Don't you like me anymore? In the oppressive heat of that afternoon, I heard her hurried footsteps returning. She was holding her breath, trying to suppress her panic as she snatched back the fake love letter I'd already read. Oh, my sweet, rule-abiding Roundy, breaking the rules for me. I liked her even more. I waited and waited, until finally, she graduated. I made her a bunny-shaped cake with my own hands, just as sweet and adorable as she was. I tied it up carefully with a ribbon and tucked my final love letter inside. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hand it to her personally. A few days later, when everything had settled down, I casually asked her, "Did you get the gift?" Her reply was quick, "Yes, it was delicious." "Thank you, Ethan." So polite. So distant. My chest tightened, and I couldn't resist asking, "And then?" She responded, "What then?" It hit me like a lightning bolt. In that moment, I understood with devastating clarity, she was politely rejecting me. Yes, thinking back carefully, I realized I hadn't seen her much over the past 2 years. She was surrounded by so many people far more interesting than me. Maybe she'd fallen for someone else. But Roundy, you used to like me the most. I was heartbroken. I had no one to talk to, so I confided in the dead. The deceased remained silent, and my heart grew icy cold. Unrequited love is so bitter. Sir, have you ever been in love with someone who didn't love you back? Your wife looks so young. She didn't cry at the funeral, she even laughed. I can tell you must have been quite the character yourself. She didn't love you, and that must have hurt just like it hurts me. But she loved your money. That's a form of love too, just like Roundy loves my face. In the mortuary, I suddenly had an epiphany. So I started working out day after day, training, studying. I maintained my physique and appearance, ensuring that every time I showed up in Roundy's life, I was someone who could captivate her attention. And it worked. She began trying to get close to me again. Though now, she pretended to be Faye. Her acting was clumsy but endearing. Was she testing my character? How tragic. As you can see, I am a calm lunatic. Roundy, Roundy. You've finally come back to me. Promise me you'll love me for a lifetime. Never change. Mutual unrequited love, Yara x Ethan.